Now, the other day, people were telling me that they are inviting me. One of my people was inviting me that there's something called Arsenal. I said, what is Arsenal? That is a European club of football that I don't know they have done what, and that I should go to celebrate. Celebrate for what? Please don't divert me. I was a footballer myself. Nobody can tell me about football, but I gave up football in 1966. I'm in Uganda. Liberation, poverty, jobs. I will be briefed about this Arsenal. Somebody was writing me. Yeah. I should celebrate Arsenal. Me, Yoweri Museveni.
So the past few days we've come across all these videos on the internet. We've seen a lot of celebration going on about Arsenal and people losing it all over the streets in different kinds of cities, Ghana, Lagos, and you name it. Okay, celebrating and children wearing in these keys, making somersaults and all that kind of thing, and adults actually crying and weeping because of this club, Arsenal. This is a club that is based in North London. You know, somebody might think it's a club that's in Africa, but no, this is a club that is based in London. Now, I grew up with football myself. I love football. I love the game, and you know, nobody can take away that from us. But here is what I cannot walk past. Whilst all that celebration was happening, you know, the flags going, the songs, and you name it, all that chaos, we've got African governments, respectable African governments, and I mean presidents, writing checks, believe it or not, writing checks to these very clubs. To be specific, the same club, Arsenal. And we're talking of about millions and millions of dollars every single year, funding these shiny, glamorous institutions that Africans worship every single weekend. And there's a very good chance that most people don't even have any clue that this is happening in the background. They've got no clue. They've got no idea that the very presidents of their own countries are actually funding these particular clubs, particularly Arsenal itself. So if you really want to understand who is really paying for this glitter and what is costing you, the very you supporter of Arsenal, the very you people that are supporting this football, then this video is for you. So before I say anything about that clip that we've just seen, I need to explain why we're even having this conversation today. Now, if we're being very honest with each other, okay, this is a club that don't really care about any of yous, okay? I mean, I don't mean to burst your bubble here, but this is a club that a lot of those people that are chanting and celebrating may not even have the opportunity to even visit the club that they love. I do appreciate football, but it's the kind of devotion that crosses from just a love of sport into something much deeper. And I think this is where I believe that all of this has been carefully constructed. And I think it's worth examining. Why do we have particularly the EU football that is highly celebrated in Africa compared to their own football over there? Because when I see Africans living on the continent in communities where the basics are still being fought for, celebrating football, EU football, English football at that level, it kind of makes you think, how did we get here in the first place? Why is all these things happening? And not only the local people, even the presidents signing checks, sending all this money all the way to these English football clubs. And if you really want to see the numbers and how the numbers tell the story, stay with me, because what I'm about to show you does not require opinion. All this, what I'm going to show you today, simply requires arithmetic, simple arithmetic, to understand what this all means. Now, here's where we start. Let's start with Arsenal. Okay, so Arsenal Football Club, we're talking about one club. Okay, this club, Arsenal, generated 691 million in revenue this season alone. Now, that is a club record if you think of it. Now, in comparison with the Confederation of African Football, which is the CAF, the president is Patrick Motsepe, okay, the governing body responsible for football across the entire 54 nations of 1.4 billion people. So you can imagine this is Arsenal alone earns nearly 5 times more than the institution running the entire African game. So you can see how much money just one club is actually making. And here's the second figure that I really want you to stick with. So we've got the South African Premier Soccer League, which is the richest domestic football league on the continent of Africa. Now, if you look at their figures and how much money they make, approximately, including the television rights and you name it, Arsenal earns what the PSL earns in 12 days. Okay, so they earn about 23 million pounds in a year, but Arsenal makes that in only 12 days. Okay, so the next time you see those people celebrating in those streets and red and white, just hold these figures in your mind, just so you know this is currently what is actually happening. And then we shall come back to it in the course of this video. Now, let's look at how this idolization is actually funded, okay, because this is where it gets interesting. That same slave, believe it or not, it cost Rwanda 10 million pounds just to put the slave that name visit Rwanda, 10 million pounds in a year. Now you can imagine from the time that this deal actually happened in 2018, they've spent over 80 million pounds. Now in terms of dollars, for those of you that might want to do the maths and do the conversion rates and everything, we're talking about probably close to 100 million United States dollars that Rwanda has spent to a football club, just to put their name in the name of attracting tourism. Now, a lot of people might argue and say, well, Rwanda is rich, it can afford all these monies, it's not as poor as other African countries. But at the end of the day, we all know that on average, okay, the Rwandan GDP per capita, we're looking at about $1,200, which shows that 27% of the people of Rwanda, the population of the people of Rwanda, still live under the poverty line. Okay, so this is still not good enough, because that same money can still go to a lot of people within the poorest communities of Rwanda and help out in big ways that you cannot even imagine. So when Arsenal won this title, okay, the President Kagame didn't just celebrate as a fan. Okay, there is no fan business there. The president himself, the entire President Kagame, the person that I love, I adore this man, he was celebrating as a partner. Now, there are those people that might argue that Arsenal does give back in terms of charity. It's got its own foundation. It's got a lot of money. But yes, it gives. We're not saying that Arsenal doesn't give. But believe it or not, its flagship international work is in Jordan. It's in Jordan helping Syrian refugees and not in Africa. Now, obviously, it's a great cause. What it's doing is helping all the refugees over there. But you'd have thought after receiving more than 80 million pounds in money, there would have been some kind of consideration, to have some kind of a charity or to be giving back some of that money to the communities. But instead, what we see is that Arsenal simply gives the old kits, old football, used boots and everything. And this is what the continent actually gets in return. Okay, all the charitable work that is happening goes somewhere else. I think, to me, this is not partnership. This is Western mineral extraction. This is exploitation at its best, because the African money is currently funding academies, football academies, their stadiums, their world-class facilities that we see, whilst our own infrastructure here crumbles, and it remains to be a dream. And you wonder, these are people that a lot of people give respect to. They admire such kind of leaders like Mr. Paul Kagame, but this is very disappointing. And to see this kind of worshipping, this lopsided kind of agreement is just terrible. And just last month, we saw David Beckham was officially declared the first British sportsman to become a billionaire in pounds, not just in dollars. So his personal net worth is now over £1 billion, which is unprecedented. And all this money is money that is built on global reach of a brand that people, these same kind of things where people worship, EU football, English football with passion, paying subscription, buying their jerseys and making sure that they are paying all these kind of things and so on. And that's the reason why I've got a lot of friends that says, oh, well, are you able to buy us some t-shirts? You're close to Liverpool or you're close to Manchester. I can send you some money. You can buy me this t-shirt and that t-shirt. I've always said no, because I don't care whether you send the money, whether you do whatever. If you want to buy your own t-shirt, you can go to their website, and I think they actually send all these things. They've got international couriers and so on. Because at the end of the day, we're just supporting these football teams blindly. You're buying a t-shirt that's going to cost you how much? $100 or £100, and then what? You're just going to wear it and to show what? And this is how most of these clubs, as you can see, they've become rich because of such kind of idolization and worshipping of football blindly, not really seeing how and where that money is actually going. Now, before we get into the conclusion, I just want you to try something here, just out of trying. When was the last time a British Prime Minister issued a formal statement congratulating the CAF champions or saying, well, we are happy with the African team of so, the league win of this, they've won this, and that? Even the newspapers here, sometimes you'd think that there'll be a situation that there's African Cup of Nations, you'd expect them to see everywhere. Nope. Those things are things that you don't even see. Now, when we saw President Ruto of Kenya making a formal address for Arsenal, the streets in Nairobi turned white and red, children like we saw in different kinds of cities. This makes you wonder, is this where we are really? You wouldn't see the Prime Minister here congratulating Casablanca, saying, well done Morocco, you've done so well, you've achieved great, this is good for you, and so on and so forth. You won't see that kind of thing happening. That image simply does not exist. It has never existed, and it will probably never will.
Now, as many of you know, I'm a proud Arsenal fan. It is true that the last 2 decades have not been very easy for us. We've had our own share of heartbreaks and near misses. But if you have been watching Gunners lately, then you know the style, the swagger, the spirit. It's all coming alive again. So to our friends in the EPL and across Europe, watch out. Arsenal is back.
So the passion, the loyalty, the emotional investment, it moves in one direction. So everything, including the money, by the way, it moves in one direction from Africa to the West. And we give more devotion to institutions that will never know our names than to the ones shaping our daily lives, then, that is worth naming. It's worth mentioning and it's worth debating, okay? This is something that we're debating, not with anger. We are not doing it out of malice. This is not out of malice. This is to try and ignite that debate, okay, and say, is it really worth it to get a head of state or a government in Africa, the poor of the poorest, signing an English football club paying millions and millions of pounds? This is something that is, in my opinion, not fair, and it's just not necessary. These kinds of things should even not be happening. So this is what we have to ask ourselves. Is President Museveni actually right? Because we've seen what he was saying about the fact that this doesn't quite tie up. Okay, you're forcing him as a president to celebrate. He was invited at this Arsenal celebration thing, and he said, well, I thought you were going to get the message, but because you don't seem to be able to get the message in this case, then I will tell you as it is. And the man spat out fact after fact. So this is what it is. And this is a conversation that I think we have to have amongst ourselves, and not just on this channel, but across many different channels. I think this is not something that is done out of malice. It's not being done out of a lack of appreciation for football. Now, I fully understand there'll be those critics that will be criticizing the president himself, well, to say it's the fact that there are no jobs. Okay, the youth have got nothing much to do, so they are occupying that space with something like football, which is giving them that sense of community. It's giving them that sense of belonging. So somehow the governments, our governments, African governments, are probably the ones to blame, because there is no sense of community or that sense of awareness to know that you can do the same to your own country. You can support a winning team, because think of it, if the entire government like Rwanda can actually sign up a football club in the EU and issue all those millions of pounds, what does that tell you about what the other people do? They'll support the president. They'll be behind that particular president because he's created a vacuum to say football means everything. English football is what everybody should be following. So, which is wrong. So the question this video is really asking is not about Arsenal. We're not asking about football. This is not about Museveni. This is not about condemning everyone else. We are simply asking what African institutions are earning that level of loyalty. What are we building that is closer to home? Okay? What are we giving people to believe in that belongs to them? Not the EU clubs, not the Arsenals, not everything else. And I think this is a conversation that needs to happen. Okay? Not just on this channel, but on many different other channels everywhere. Let those Arsenal supporters know that their governments, their presidents are paying a lot of money to these English football clubs, okay? Not just one, but many of them. So if you come across those Arsenal supporters that are running up and down and making a lot of noise, and some of them complaining of jobs and engaging themselves into political violence when it comes to attacking or opposing a political opponent, just tell them to say, well, before you do that, well, do you know that your government is sending millions and millions of pounds or dollars to an English football club because of that sleeve they are trying to promote tourism? Now, other people might argue and say, well, the Rwanda's tourism sector has been boosted because we've had a 47% rise in tourism, and it's generating a lot of income as a result of that. But then also in comparison with how much money is actually leaving the country, I think that does not tie up. Okay, and a lot of other African countries, I'm not sure whether other African countries are doing the same as Rwanda. I'm not sure. I'm not looked into it myself. But, you know, this is not an attack on Rwanda, okay? In case you are Rwandan and you're watching this, it's not an attack on your country. This is just to say that as an African watching what's going to happen in Rwanda, this does not make sense, okay? This is something that has to, because, I mean, it's not as if the country has probably tried to pitch, you know, African to African tourism, okay? This is a President Kagame, okay? The president that a lot of people admire. You know, a lot of people have a lot of respect, high respect for this President Kagame. He's one of my favorite African presidents, if you ask me. But then just to think that he himself as well is getting involved in these kinds of lopsided agreements or partnerships make me wonder. So if this is your first time joining us on this channel, my name is NB. This is war we are reclaiming. Until next time, we'll see you in the next one. Okay.